Welcome to the N1 Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Marcus Sadu, and today I'm going to be chatting about that time I didn't talk for 10 days. It was a pretty wild experience. Now, lots of you are familiar with my story, my struggles with alcohol and drugs, etc. And I believe that those struggles led me to sort of try alternative strategies to feel happier and more content fairly early in life. I was basically willing to try anything because I just felt so miserable, to be honest. So I was 19 years old, and my girlfriend at the time had recently gotten back from a 10-day silent meditation retreat called Vipassana. And she suggested that I go too. She had a really good experience with it, and she thought that I would find it helpful as well. Now, what is Vipassana? Vipassana is a meditation technique, and there are Vipassana centers all over the world. I happen to go to one in a place called Merritt, which is about 3 hours outside of Vancouver, where I was living at the time. And my friend Ben, who is also 19, agreed to go with me. So we drove up in my car together. And I remember when we first got there, I was super nervous. My girlfriend hadn't told me much about it because she felt like it might take away from the experience if I knew exactly what I was getting into, which made sense. So I was kind of going in blind. I had a rough idea of what I was getting into, but that was about it. So at these retreats, there is no talking, no touching, no eye contact, no sex, even with yourself, bummer, no reading, no phones, essentially no outside stimulation at all, because you're meant to be fully immersed in yourself and your thoughts and basically what's going on with you internally. Now, the men and the women stay in separate lodging areas, and the only time the men and the women are together is actually inside the actual meditation hall, which is basically just a big ass empty room with carpet and some pillows. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail as far as the day-to-day meditation schedule that they lay out, but rather give you my experience, what I got from it, and who knows, you might be interested in doing a retreat, or maybe it might spark your interest in meditation in general, or maybe it might just be an interesting listen for you as far as sharing my experience. So I'll get this out of the way right off the bat. This 10-day meditation retreat was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. But it was also one of the most beneficial and rewarding things I've ever done in my life as well. The first thing that people usually say when this comes up in a combo and I'm like, hey, I did this 10-day silent retreat, people typically say, oh, I could never do that. And you might have actually just said that to yourself in your head. In my opinion, it's not a matter of if you can do it, it's more a matter of whether you want to do it and are committed to doing something like this. It's extremely difficult, but I think it's something that everyone is able to do, assuming they are willing to. Now, when I originally signed up for the retreat, I knew I was going to complete it because my ego would not let me quit. I thought about having to tell all of my friends and family that I had given up and didn't complete, and the thought of that actually pushed me through and made it slightly easier to do it, or more accurately, not quite as hard, because I had already decided beforehand that I was going to finish the 10 days. Now, truth be told, I wanted to leave every single day. It was hard as fuck. And it was funny. We had times during the day where we could go outside for walks. And you guys know how much I like to walk and exercise and move. So I couldn't wait to get outside every day. The thing about heading out for a walk was that the way the center was set up is you can see the parking lot from the walking path. So I would have to walk by my car multiple times every single day. And I literally fantasize about grabbing my keys, hopping in my car, throwing on my music, and like fucking peeling out. But again, the thought of giving up and telling everybody when I got back home that I hadn't completed was actually worse than going through the day-to-day process itself. So I decided to stick it out, fortunately. Now, different folks have different experiences as far as which day is the easiest or the hardest. For me, day 1, 2, 3, and 4 were absolutely excruciating, right up until the nighttime meditation on day 4. I was in mental and emotional pain from the meditation itself, but the physical pain through the first 4 days was a little bit overwhelming for me at that point. And it was just from sitting for so long each day. My back and my hips felt jacked up, and it had gotten to a point where I knew it was day 4. I had 6 days left, and it hurt so much just to sit that about halfway through that evening session on day 4, I started to sort of laugh to myself. I didn't actually laugh out loud, but sort of that internal laugh, because I knew I was committed to that whole 10 days. I decided beforehand that I wasn't going to leave. But I also knew that the pain wasn't going anywhere. There was literally nowhere to go, nothing to do other than to sort of surrender to essentially how much physical pain I was in. And to me at that time, it felt like a breakthrough because I felt like I had transcended the physical part of the process in a way. Definitely not the mental and the emotional aspects, but the physical, I felt like I could separate from it a little bit because it was almost like I was me, but not my body necessarily. It was just that I was experiencing physical pain. It's sort of tough to explain, but if you've had an out-of-body experience in any way, shape, or form, it was basically like that. So after that evening session on day 4, things got a lot easier from a physical standpoint because it was almost like when I surrendered to the physical pain, it actually dissipated the pain a lot, which was really interesting to observe. And if you've ever been doing a workout and you start to feel some serious lactic acid build up in your muscles, it hurts a lot. But then as soon as you stop sort of resisting and rather embrace that pain, all of a sudden it becomes a lot more manageable. It's a really interesting phenomenon. Now, I definitely did a lot of daydreaming throughout the 10 days because the mind wanders a ton, and the whole purpose of Vipassana meditation specifically is to focus on your breath and the physical sensations you're experiencing in your body. But I drifted off thinking about anything and everything super consistently. I told you I was fantasizing about driving off in my car. I was fantasizing about sex. I was thinking about what I was going to eat that day or what was on the menu, or what I was going to say to X, Y, and Z person when I got back home. All sorts of stuff was popping up. And this brings up an important point around what meditation is and isn't, in my opinion, because I often hear folks say, I'm so bad at it, or I can't meditate, or I can't focus. And I think the assumption is that you're going to be quote unquote good at it right away, which could not be further from the truth. Focus is a skill, and like anything, it takes practice. And you can think about it like learning a new language. You have to work at it super consistently. But if you tell yourself, oh, I'm just someone that's bad at languages, or I'm not a language person, you're definitely not doing yourself any favors on the progress front, because that internal dialogue matters. Also, the point isn't to eliminate your thoughts. Your thoughts aren't going anywhere. They are going to be running in the background no matter what you do. What it's about is separating yourself a little bit from those thoughts. So, when you're standing so close to something that is basically blurry and you can't see it clearly, but then when you take a step back, you can see what it is. The same concept applies here around meditation. It's just about creating a little bit of distance from those thoughts that you're having and not identifying with them so much. You can take a step back from whatever's running on in the background, and you can see more clearly as far as what's going on in the present moment. Another example would be focusing on your breath. So you can start by focusing on breathing in as slowly as you can and then out as slowly as you can. Maybe you get one inhale and one exhale, and then all of a sudden you start thinking about that work project that you need to do, or who knows, maybe a whole 4 to 5 minutes goes by and then you remember, you're like, oh shit, my breath. So you get back to focusing on the inhale and the exhale. And maybe you get 2 focused breaths in this time, and then your thoughts take you on how you have to drive your kids to soccer practice later on, and then what you're going to make for dinner, and 3 minutes go by, and then you remember and you're like, oh shit, oh right, my breath, and you get back to the inhale and the exhale. That's meditation. It's not some far out concept that you can only understand if you're sitting on the top of a mountain cross-legged surrounded by fucking monks. It's something you can do on your couch or in your car or standing in line at the grocery store. And one thing that I can guarantee is that you're not going to be great at it to start, but with consistent practice, you will get better. I know for myself, I've had tons of meditative moments playing sports where everything seems to slow down a lot and I'm just hyper aware of what is happening in that exact moment. So it doesn't have to be something that you're absolutely still for. There are walking meditations. There are folks that feel meditative when they do yoga or they swim or they rock climb, or maybe the gym is a meditative experience, or going for a run outside is a meditative experience. Basically what I'm getting at here is that you don't have to be a hippie eating a vegan diet and living in an ashram to do or benefit from meditation. You can actually forget the word meditation altogether and sub in the word focus or attention or breathing or awareness if it helps you identify with what it actually is. So after day 4, I had gotten past the physical portion of the process in a sense, but then it was more of a mental and emotional battle. I'd say more mental than anything for me. I often get asked, what's the biggest takeaway from that experience? And from day 1, I've said it was a mental ball builder. That 10 days really put me in touch with sort of what I was capable of, how far I could push myself, and it essentially gave me more mental grit, I felt. Because if I could not talk and be completely immersed in myself for 10 straight days, I felt like I could do just about anything. So the key takeaway for me in this experience was getting past that physical body somewhat and really building my mental strength and mental endurance. There was also a bunch of comedic relief over the course of the 10 days because there are a bunch of other people with you during the process and you're obviously not talking to any of them, but I had created all of these stories about each individual, what I thought their personalities were like and what I thought their lives were like. I remember at one point I turned the corner to walk down the hall and it was probably about 50 or 60 feet long. And as soon as I turned the corner, my friend Ben had turned the corner too, but he was at the opposite end of the hall. So we were just like walking towards one another for a good 15 to 20 seconds, but we couldn't talk. We couldn't make eye contact. We couldn't even acknowledge each other. So there were a bunch of these like funny moments sprinkled in throughout the process. Another time I rounded the corner to the bathroom and it was completely empty except for my bud Ben again, and all of a sudden we were side by side taking a piss at the urinals, and this was like day 6 or 7. We hadn't talked in what felt like ages, and we were standing side by side at these urinals, sort of chuckled to ourselves. All we wanted to do was share our experience, what we were going through. We were both curious about how the other was doing, but again, no talking. There are 2 main meditation teachers for the whole group, one man and one woman, and then the men have their own assistant who is a male, and then the women have their own assistant who's a female. And they deal with, day-to-day stuff that potentially pops up for the participants. Now, the only sentence that I said over the course of the 10 days was I asked our assistant if I could move to a wall spot so I could lean up against the wall, because I noticed that someone else had moved from the wall into the center and my back was fucking killing me. So I asked him, I said, can I move to that wall spot? That's all I said. And it was 7 words. And all he said to me in his cute Indian accent, he said, "You are not strong, man." And I didn't know what to say. I was 19 and I definitely identified as someone who was strong physically. And it was just the perfect thing to say to me at that point, because my ego popped up and would have had to have said no if I wanted the wall spot, or if I said yes, then obviously I was going to stay sitting where I was initially. So I sort of shrugged off the question. I was all pissed off, and still to this day I think about how awesome that comment was. It was super simple, super straightforward question, to the point, and it was just the perfect thing to say to me at that point that completely shut me up. So circling back around, and now that I've got more perspective on the whole experience, I'm so glad that I agreed to do that retreat. And since then, meditation has actually been a real staple in my life. Personally, I meditate for 10 minutes 5 times per week, so Monday through Friday. It's essentially the first thing I do in the morning, and I find it really helps to set up my day for success from a well-being standpoint, because it does just make me feel good. It also makes me feel accomplished because it's the first task of the day. But most importantly, I'd say it buys me time, and I'll explain how. So going throughout the day, stuff happens, right? You get cut off in traffic, things don't go as planned, problems pop up at work or at home. And what meditation does for me is it provides me with a second before I react to something. So, for example, if I get cut off in traffic, before I just immediately be like, fuck, that person's a piece of shit, I hate them, you know, the standard stuff that we say to ourselves in the privacy of our own cars. And instead of having that outburst, most of the time I'm able to distance myself just a little bit and be like, okay, in the big scheme of things, who cares? It's really not that important. That is a massive overreaction considering what happened. And it just helps me deal with those everyday life situations that pop up. So instead of being pissed off for the next 5, 10, 20 minutes about someone that cut me off, I can shed that unhelpful feeling and behavior a little bit quicker and go about my day in a more content way. Now, I'd obviously be lying if I said I didn't ever get pissed off and frustrated, etc. throughout the day. I'm not some enlightened monk that just, flows with every situation in life and it's the process. But taking that 10 minutes per day has just given me a more enjoyable experience with the other 23 hours and 50 minutes, I'd say. So that was my experience with Vipassana and how meditation fits into my life. I may do another Vipassana retreat at some point in the future, but I know I'll definitely continue on with my 10 minutes a day just because I find it super helpful and a really worthwhile investment. Now, if you have any questions about meditation, Vipassana, or whatever, reach out, ask away. I'd be happy to answer anything that pops up for you. And if you're interested in personalized one-on-one nutritional coaching or workout programming, you can check out the website at n1fitness.com/coaching, which is linked below in the show notes. You can also follow me on Instagram at n1fitness and friend me up at Marcus Sadu on Facebook as well. I hope you found this episode useful, guys. Thanks so much for listening, and I will catch you on the next one. See ya.